For the seventh week in a row, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have hit the streets of Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, and dozens of other Israeli cities in opposition to the Netanyahu-led government, predominantly over the controversial judicial reform proposals. And this movement does seem to be having an impact, as one of the judicial bills that was planned for last Monday was delayed, likely due to the overwhelming opposition. And this Monday will see the second consecutive national day of struggle, where thousands will march on the Knesset to protest. But will this actually stop the judicial reforms altogether, increase the chances of a compromise, or are they falling on deaf ears? Israeli Police Chief Kobi Shabtai, among other people, has warned about the potential escalation leading to a political assassination. Is this just scare tactics, or is violence actually on the horizon? And with the US envoy Tom Nides asking Netanyahu to put the brakes on the overhaul, is Israel at risk of alienating its allies? What's next for Israel's judicial system?
So let's get to it. What is next for Israel's judicial system? As always, we'll begin with our quick-fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we'll pick up the conversation from there. So, Oren Kessler, please take the lead. Your 30 seconds are on.
Well, if the question is where are we headed from here, I think there is a fairly broad consensus in this country, not shared by everyone, of course, but that there is room to make changes to the judicial system in this country. But I think there's perhaps an equally broad consensus, or certainly a very wide one, that this may not be it. So I think there's a certain, if there's any common ground among Israelis or among a majority of Israelis, it's that perhaps something should be done about the judicial system, but maybe not this one.
Okay, Hazan, your take?
Yeah, I'm hoping that we will accomplish soon the judicial reforms in 3 readings in the Knesset. This reform is essential to restore democracy, human rights, and civil rights. Don't forget, that was one of the major, I would say, promises or main promises of our party during the election campaign, and we repeatedly spoke about it. More than that, there are some politicians from the left wing who already admitted in the past that they are in favor, and right now they oppose it in the name of the position, not only the opposition.
Position and not just opposition. Last but not least, Naphtali Ben Simon, your thoughts?
It seems to me tonight, before the vote tomorrow, that we are in 2 trains running very fast in the same track, looking for a collision, no dialogue, nothing to talk about. And it seems to me that everybody is waiting for something radical to happen, and maybe after that they will talk. But I don't see any chance of talking tonight at this hour.
Okay, and on that note, let's please feel free to interact from this point onwards. Eli, I do want to start with you, and again, gentlemen, please feel free to engage in a conversation. Did Netanyahu lose control over the situation?
No doubt about it. I'll tell you why. Because we have a stable coalition. Israel is a democracy, and therefore you can see demonstrations. But I tend not to forget that the biggest demonstration of democracy was in November 1st, when we've got a huge majority. Over 2.5 million people voted for us, knowing that we are going to do it. Another thing that is very important, the Israeli media is trying to give you all the time a sense that Netanyahu is not controlling the situation. It doesn't start here. It started in 1996, and then in 2009, and then in 2015, all the time. But don't forget, Netanyahu is holding the wheel, and right now we are promoting not only with the judicial reforms, but we are going to expand the circle of peace and to implement what we have promised to the people before the election.
So Naphtali Ben Simon, you're listening to Eli Hazan saying Netanyahu did not lose control. On the contrary, he's very much in control. This is what he wanted. How do you connect the dots here?
I totally disagree with my friend Eli Hazan. I know him for a long time. I know Netanyahu for a long time. For the first time, Netanyahu don't control the situation. He has a very, very hard wing coalition, and it doesn't stop here. He cannot control the situation when from one side you have Smotrich, from the other side Ben Gvir, and he has his own personal indictment situation that he's inside. So this situation is making him, we are looking for a leadership. I don't see any kind of leadership from Netanyahu. He needs the vote tomorrow. He will vote for it. And after that, he will say, okay, now I want to show you my leadership and let's talk. But it seems to me that it's too little, too late. And I think he's playing a very dangerous game. And I just wonder, I know Netanyahu for a long time, what is his legacy for this country, for his personality, for his period, for his political history?
Legacy, Naphtali?
Yes, his legacy.
Because if I'll start, I will never finish. First of all, look at the GDP of the State of Israel, economically.
No. I'm looking, Eli, I'm looking for the legacy today. The situation that we are tearing apart the Israeli society, the Israeli army, the Israeli police, Israeli defense forces, everyone. And I know the Likud from inside, and I respect you, but I'm telling you, this is unprecedented situation that we never met, and Netanyahu does not control the situation. Nobody in the Likud control the situation. We are talking about Smotrich, Ben Gvir, Deri, and others, but not Netanyahu and not the Likud. Unfortunately.
If I reply, Eli, it would be amazing.
Please, Eli, and then Oren will chime in, hopefully.
You present an amazing combination of being boring, lies, and so on and so forth. You used to say, not you personally, but the left wing in Israel, about Menachem Begin, the same things. But don't forget, Netanyahu is in power for how long? Since 1996 with
15 years.
He created so many changes. Wait a second, so many changes in Israel. Besides that, you tend to forget another thing. The majority of the people voted for this government in a huge majority.
Not for his agenda. Not for this agenda, Eli. Not for this agenda.
Are you sure?
For
you
forming
sure,
a government.
We spoke all over
but
again,
not for this agenda.
And again before the election. Wait a second, let me give you another remark.
Okay.
Who is number 2 in the primaries of Likud? Yariv Levin is the leader of the judicial reforms. Who is number 4 in the Likud list? Is Dudi Amsalev, who spoke all the time about the judicial reforms.
But you know what? I will use this remark as a segue to my question to Mr. Kessler here. Speaking of Dudi Amsalev and his what is now famous/infamous Rolex speech, blaming protesters for all being with a wealthy background. So my question to you, Oren, is it really about the judiciary and democracy, or are we talking about the same old, ancient, racial/political demons all over again?
I think there's a certain proportion of the opponents of these judicial reforms, and a certain proportion of those who are hitting the streets who simply don't like Netanyahu, they don't like his politics, they may be on the left and they don't like the right. That does exist, but I think it's hard to ignore that there are a significant amount of right-wing voices, certainly right-of-center voices, who are against this judicial reform. I'm thinking of here in this country, we had Michael Oren, for example, came out, the former ambassador to Washington, came out against it.
Yes, and a regular here.
Yoram Cohen, the former Netanyahu-appointed former head of the Shin Bet, came out against it. Alan Dershowitz in the U.S., who is a longtime friend of Netanyahu and a stalwart supporter of Israel, came out against it. So I don't think, just wrapping up here, I don't think it can be simply boiled down to a matter of right versus left.
Eli, please.
Yeah, I want to ask him about Alan Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz said out loud and very clear that Netanyahu is under unfair trial. How come people like you did not mention that? And by the way, I disagree completely with Alan Dershowitz, but I can respect him.
Well, I'm certainly not a spokesperson for Alan Dershowitz, and I disagree with Alan Dershowitz on many things, but I did listen to an interview with him just recently in which he expresses his support for Netanyahu personally, but says that, and makes the point that you just made, that he thinks the cases against Netanyahu are essentially unjust, inflated, and yet that he thinks Netanyahu is wrong on this count on the judicial reforms.
Yeah, there appears to be some sort of a consensus about the need of a reform, just not this reform. But I do want to shift the focus for a bit. Naphtali, the Attorney General, at the beginning preventing Netanyahu from getting involved, citing conflict of interest, but then urging him to get involved to lower the flame. Is it an own goal here from the standpoint of the Attorney General? The politicizing the role to an extent?
We are in a very confusing times. Where from one side, the judicial system and the decisions, and from the other side, we are looking for leadership and something to lower the flames of the Israeli society. My private opinion is that I want to hear Prime Minister Netanyahu more these days. I want to hear from him. I want to hear from the minister from the Likud. I don't want to hear only from Smotrich and Ben Gvir. And this is something that it's very important. And I think the vast majority of this, the citizen of this country, and you know what, Ali? Even the polls that was shown on Friday in Channel 12 that showed that even the members of the Likud, the voters of the Likud, from the 2 million and more people who voted, and they said we need a dialogue. We want a dialogue. We need to stop. We need to talk because we are just like that before something very serious can happen, and we cannot fix it. So I think, in my opinion, there is something very clear that he cannot talk, but at least he can lower the flames.
Eli, yes, in the short time we have left for them.
Netanyahu is speaking all the time in trying to calm down the situation. You don't want to listen as much as you didn't want to listen before the election about the judicial reforms. Wait a second, Naphtali. Second, you want to speak about polls in Israel? Are you kidding? Those are the same pollsters who predicted that the left wing, or at least Netanyahu, will not be able to win the election. Don't speak with me about the pollsters in Israel.
Come on, Eli. Come on, Eli.
Come on,
let's be more serious. Come on, Eli.
I'm serious. I'm completely serious. Do not deny the facts,
we are talking about the future of the Israeli society, our future, the children's future. And you are not
Naphtali.
Why cannot stop? Stop and wait and think and talk and maybe at least a pause for a month, 60 days.
Naphtali Ben Simon, you asked for us to stop and pause, so we're doing just that. We're taking a very short break now, but when we get back, part 2 of our summit, we broaden our discussion. How will it put a spoke in the U.S.-Israel relation wheels? So we're taking a short break, part 2 of the summit, right after. Do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the summit. Still with us, Eli Hazan, Naphtali Ben Simon, and Oren Kessler. Thank you, gentlemen, so very much for staying with us. We're also staying on topic, but before we get back to our conversation, no longer really diplomatic, the U.S. Telling Israel loud, clear, publicly, hold your horses. And Israel, Netanyahu, this is what he had to say. Take a listen.
On this occasion, I'm happy to disappoint our enemies and also to reassure our friends. Israel was and will remain a strong and vibrant democracy, independent democracy. But precisely against this background of expectations of our enemies, the expectations of destruction and bloodshed, we need to stop talking about blood in the streets. We need to lower the height of the flames. We need to calm the spirits. This is the clear call I'm calling from here, and I expect all public leaders to say these clear things.
So let's get to it. Is Israel alienating its allies? We once again begin with our quickfire round, 30 seconds each, and pick it up from there. Naphtali Ben Simon, please take the lead.
Okay, I just want to say to Netanyahu, you are the prime minister. You were elected, and the Likud party and the coalition. It's okay. Nobody have a doubt about it. Please govern. Recover what it needs. The cost of living, housing, economy, interior security. There are so many things to do. And the only thing that I hear from this government is judicial reform, a revolution. Not a reform, a revolution. Why?
Okay. Eli Hazan, your take?
Yeah, Israel is not alienating to its allies. The opposite is true. Israel is a strong ally to its allies. What we are facing is left-wingers who lost in the election, is under a tantrum attack, and they are supplying false information, not only to the allies of Israel, but mainly to its enemies. Just look what Hassan Nasrallah was saying yesterday. All the Arab leaders, with no exclusion, and some of the Western leaders, were waiting to Netanyahu that he will come back to be prime minister because they trust him. Very simple.
Okay, last but not least, Oren Kessler, your thoughts?
I think it's hard to deny that Israel's allies have already sounded the warning. Have already sounded warnings about this. We had U.S. Ambassador Tom Nye saying fairly clearly that he encourages Israel or encourages the Netanyahu government to pump the brakes. We've seen foreign companies starting to pull out. We've seen warnings of economic damage to this country. So I think it's hard to deny that, rightly or wrongly, that Israel's most important allies are worried.
Yeah, and on that note, gentlemen, I want us to begin our conversation. But as we speak, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, is currently in Jerusalem speaking to the Conference of Presidents of major Jewish organizations, plural, and he's telling them, addressing the issue of the judicial reform, that all democracies must respect the will of other free nations as we respect the decisions of other democracies, obviously alluding to the remarks we're hearing from Washington's envoys here. Is the U.S. overstepping its boundaries, Eli Hazan?
I don't think so. I mean, Eli, I remember what's happened in 1996 when Netanyahu won against all odds. I remember the criticism President Clinton of the Western allies of Israel after they were fed in the same system by the Israeli left wing who lost the election. Don't forget, at the end, we have what I'm saying, a common values, and we have common strategies. We must prevent nuclear Iran. And if you pay attention, even when Blinken spoke with Netanyahu about other issues, he emphasized the need to combat nuclear Iran, and we shall remember that.
Oren Kessler, what do you think? Israel, the U.S. on a collision course here?
I wouldn't say collision course. I think Tom Nides tried to express his concern fairly diplomatically, and he put in the requisite words about the strong relationship and sovereignty. But it's a Democratic administration in Washington. There's no way around it. And this is not the Trump administration, and they have different worldviews and different sensibilities, and I think that's fairly clear here.
Well, Naphtali Ben-Simon, the Israeli daily Haaretz, in its editorial today, calling on the U.S. to refrain from using its veto power in favor of Israel, is some sort of a punishment, quote unquote, over the reform. Will or should the U.S. put Israel on the spot in that manner?
No, I totally disagree. I cannot see any chance that the U.S. will use its veto against Israel. And I think we are sharing so many values, but we have disagree inside the family. We are a big family, Israel and U.S., and we are disagree about some values, and it's a sincere concern. It's not something that the American ambassador said just to punish or to say something about the relationship between Israel and the United States. And Ali, one more thing. You know what is the biggest tragedy? Netanyahu was the responsible to bring so many friends to Israel, new friends to Israel. And what we see today, he's just forgetting everything just to keep his coalition, and he's losing so many friends. So why again? I have so many questions to him. Why losing so many friends that you work so hard to bring them? And there are true friends of Israel that they are concerning about what's going on here. They don't recognize.
What you're saying, Naphtali?
They don't recognize this Israel.
Okay. Yeah.
What you're saying is nonsense. I'll tell you why. Not only the American administration is not neglecting us, is more than that. We have something in common. That's what I've said about Iran. But you tend to forget that 2 weeks ago, Chad relaunched the embassy in Tel Aviv. Minister of Foreign Affairs Eli Cohen went to Sudan to complete the Abraham Accords. More than that, United Arab Emirates has a strong connection to Israel. What you're saying is completely untrue. More than that, Netanyahu paid a visit to
Eli,
France.
the European, the EU, the US, Canada, Australia, so many Western countries. What they are saying, it's a nonsense. It's nonsense.
Yes, it's what you are portraying is nonsense. Of course, there are some disagreements, but we are not destroying anything. More than that, as I told you, please pay attention to the numbers, to the GDP per capita of Israel. We are more than Germany. We are more than Japan, France, and some others.
Yes, okay, but there is...
Okay, Eli, and those are the people who are demonstrating and will be tomorrow in the Knesset to say no to the reform.
Okay, so thank you for circling back to our topic on Naphtali Ben Simon. Oren Kessler, Herzog, the Israeli president, Isaac Herzog, of course, claiming compromise is within reach, but the ball is at whose court at this point in time?
I think even these, 100,000 protesters hitting the streets, I think there's an unspoken realization that if Netanyahu and his partners want to do this, and they do, they will do it. And Netanyahu has to pay attention to these protests, but in the end, I think they recognize he can do it if he wants to.
Naphtali Ben Simon, the protests only solidifying the coalition to an extent?
I think the demonstration and what we saw, and what we will see tomorrow, it's a very good sign for the health of this society, maybe the future of this society, and maybe they are the last chance to save us from lunatics.
Eli Hazan, your final remarks?
Yeah, I respect the demonstrators very much. Israel is a democracy. Of course, they have the right to demonstrate, but they tend to forget 100,000 people is less than 4 seats. And the biggest demonstration of democracy was in November 1st. Over 2.5 million people voted for the Netanyahu bloc to fulfill the judicial reforms.